Well, hello everybody. My name is Alex and I'm currently joined in my garden by Stephen Woodford and Rachel Oates of the YouTube channels Rationality Rules and Rachel Oates. And we're in the process of discussing some pretty big topics. If you go over to Stephen's channel, you'll be able to see us talking about veganism, which has been a pretty highly requested topic, a very interesting one as well. And on Rachel's channel, we're talking about abortion, another fairly nice topic, of course. On this channel, something that I've kind of been promising, I want to delve into the topic of nihilism, which is it's a tricky topic, it's a delicate topic, and I think we all have slightly different views on nihilism. So I think it's a good idea to define some terms, say what we think about nihilism, and then have a discussion, defend our views, and see where we are. So,
sounds good.
The most important thing with nihilism is trying to get a clear definition of what we mean when we say nihilism. Now, as far as I understand nihilism, and this is the definition I think it would be good to work with, and even if you disagree with the definition, you could just run with what we're talking about here anyway, what we're calling nihilism. So there are different types of nihilism. I think they're all connected, but the real kind of nihilism that means the most to people, I think, the thing that people really mean when they say nihilism on its own, is a kind of existential nihilism. The idea that there is no objective purpose to life. Now, even that sentence itself can be a little bit of an odd one. What do you really mean by purpose? What do you mean by life? What do you mean by purpose to life? Is that even a sensible concept?
My question is more, what do you mean by objective purpose?
Yeah, of course, objective is a big part of it too. But
also, that's a smuggle in, is it not?
How do you mean?
So, why does purpose have to be objective?
Well, okay, this is something we can discuss. So, basically, my position on this is, you'll know if you've seen my videos before that I'm a moral nihilist, meaning that I don't believe that moral propositions can be true or false. I think that they're basically meaningless statements and can't be objective anyway. And a lot of people have said that this leads to existential nihilism. Some people seem to think that atheism itself leads to existential nihilism. So, my position on the matter, being someone who does not believe in objective morality and does not believe in God, it's very, very difficult for me to defend the proposition that there is purpose to life, whatever that means. So basically what I want to ask you guys is, do you think there is purpose to life? Do you think that purpose is objective? What do you actually mean by that, by those terms? And then you'll be the ones making an active claim. You'll be saying there is purpose, and I'll be questioning those arguments and seeing if they hold and if I find them philosophically consistent. And if I do, then perhaps we'll see a change of mind. So whoever wants to kick things off,
Sure.
Answering those questions.
To just expand a bit on nihilism, you're saying there's several types, and you've got existential, which is the idea that there's no purpose. You have moral nihilism, which is the idea that there is nothing that's morally true, and that leads to obvious problems. And then you have, what's the third?
Epistemological?
Yeah, epistemological nihilism, which is basically that knowledge isn't ascertainable as 100%. Now, as far as the latter, I am nihilistic, in the sense that I think Descartes was right when he said that I think, therefore I am, and that's the limit of what he can know for sure, which is to say that he knows that he exists in some form, that consciousness can't be an illusion, but he doesn't know how it manifests. Us being here today, these things that we're drinking from, these cameras, all of this could be in a simulation. I can't know for sure, therefore I can't grab 100% knowledge, and therefore I'm nihilistic when it comes to epistemological concerns, with maybe one exception. When it comes to the purpose, I say that I'm not a nihilist when it comes to that element. Before I can tell you why, we need to make sure that we have the same definition of purpose, because I have a feeling that you may be smuggling in certain things into that definition that I would object to. So that would be my opening statements, really. I don't know if you want to weigh in at all.
So I think for me it's a little bit tough, because for me, a person having purpose in their life, like, there's no big one overarching purpose to all of life. There's not necessarily like a big overarching purpose to everyone being here, but I think individuals can define their own purpose in life. So I'm not quite sure where that fits into like specific definitions and specific labels.
Would you say
but,
like 100% people define their own purpose, or would you say there's something else involved? Or
so that's where I think it's a little bit kind of like tough and tricky, because I think there are influences on how people define their purpose, and I think sometimes maybe other people pressure people to feel they have a certain purpose or feel they have to go a certain way or something, but ultimately I think it is a very kind of like personal thing. And you know, if one person decides, you know what, this is what I feel is my purpose in life, this is my reason for wanting to live, this is my reason for wanting to do these things, this is my reason for wanting to continue and do this and grow and whatever, then I don't really think it's anyone else's business to come in and say, oh no, that's not your purpose. You know, so it's a tricky one, and I don't really know where it fits in with specific labels. But
yeah, I mean, before you give us your definition of purpose, do you think that there's legitimacy to saying that atheism is nihilistic, or do you think that's incorrect?
I think yes, although I suppose the point I would make myself is when somebody says that atheism leads to nihilism, they often defend that with references to moral nihilism. They say if there's no God, there is no right or wrong.
But I've seen existential as well, just as much actually, now I think about it. Lots of people just saying if there's no ultimate purpose. And another point to be added, of course, which is important, is that you have Buddhists, etc., that have a purpose. It's got nothing to do with a God, but it is existential in the sense that it's a grander goal that continues over the expanse of all time.
But whether that's true or false, I would basically make the case that perhaps atheists really should be nihilists, yes, but no more or less than the religious should. I think that there's I think it's a bit of a false distinction.
No less than the religious?
No.
So is that, in effect, you saying Christians should be nihilists?
Yes, ultimately speaking.
So in a Christian
but
mind,
surely, yeah,
they believe that there is divine edicts on morality, if you want to take that sense, and there is a purpose to your life. There's a reason why you were here.
Surely by defining yourself as something like a Christian, you're saying, I think life has this purpose.
So if the Christian says to you, listen, this is a purpose that was teleologically built into me from a deity, and here is my moral compass provided by this. So how do you say the nihilistic?
So take moral nihilism, for instance, the proposition that nothing is right or wrong, that doesn't make any objective sense.
Right.
Do you think that a Christian has a legitimate claim to say that their morality is objective, is true?
Well, now that we're coming into epistemological nihilism, because how do you know anything's true?
Well, on the grounded assumptions that most people share, like let's say things like sense experience, do you think a Christian has the ability to claim that their morality is true?
So, in reference to your first video, I believe it was your first video, which you've recently released on morality, this seems to come down to subjectivism. At the heart of it is what I was just saying about Descartes, which is you can't really verify anything to 100% certainty, and so you can't have objective knowledge of it if you define objective to mean 100% knowledge.
Well,
so
objective
is this
for
the
me,
approach you're coming from?
objectivity does not mean
to you, perhaps to approach it obliquely would be better. Does this cup exist independent of what you think?
Well, I would say yes.
Okay.
Though
to the Christian,
I would admit
God and his morals exist independent of what you think as well.
Right. But
if you would say that's objective, they would say that's objective.
I would admit that the fact that that cup exists is based on some pretty hefty assumptions, but ultimately can be based in the objective claim of Descartes. Right. And so when you break things down far enough, you do get to some objectivity. With morality,
well, Descartes wouldn't have said you could get an objective claim if you define objective.
No, but it's still based on an objective assumption at the base of things.
What do you mean by assumption?
The objective assumption that if you are aware of any experience that you exist, that's an objective claim.
But the fact of you being aware, meaning that you exist, has no reference whatsoever to this cup existing itself. So if you're saying that this cup exists, lovely cup by the way, if you're saying that this cup exists, or mug, I don't know the right term, you're making a claim outside of your own experience, and better than that, you're making a truth claim. So you're not actually, if you're doing that, you're not an epistemological nihilist. You're saying that it does exist.
Well, I suppose what I would say is that I can't know for sure if that cup exists.
So I can't know for
So
sure. Yeah.
when I say that, but this is precisely the problem. When I say that that cup exists, I recognise that I can't know that as an objective fact.
Yes.
But the difference with that and morality is that even if I can't necessarily know whether that cup exists or not, it either does or it doesn't.
But surely there's like objective evidence that the cup likely exists, but
Sure,
we
but
can't
you can only say likely.
Yeah.
But this is the
But
thing.
that's still objective evidence, even if the claim isn't objective.
Look,
Is that right?
You can
Yeah.
never you can never demonstrate objectively. If you're considering things like how can you even trust your sense experience, you cannot prove that that cup exists. However, it's still the case that it's either true or false that that cup does exist. Yes.
Not if you can't get past that level.
Just because you can't demonstrate it doesn't mean that it's not true or false.
No, I agree with you. But if you're saying that, correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying about your senses and that you can't know for sure whether or not this exists. Therefore, you can't even make a statement about it being existent or not, because you could be wrong about the law of non-contradiction. Because that's your experience as well. Everything falls under this purview.
Do you think the laws of logic fall under experience?
Yeah, of course they do. You're experiencing them. They could be different outside of this fact that you're in.
So are you saying that the laws of logic are a product of the human mind?
No, not necessarily. I'm just saying that we have to use our subjectivity to evaluate this cup, just as we evaluate the laws of logic.
Yeah, but here's the thing. So this is an important distinction that I'm making. Okay. Now I admit that, and this is a problem a lot of people have had with my subjective claims about morality. They've said, well, if you're going to say that morality is ultimately based on subjectivity, then so is everything. Not necessarily.
I agree with you. Not
Because
necessarily.
to say that something is subjective is not to say that we will never know if it's true or false. In the same sense that to say that something is objectively true doesn't mean that we can demonstrate it to be true or we can know it to be true. It just means that it is true independent of human opinion about whether it's true or not. That's what it means.
So there is a multitude of definitions for true and objective, and you're not using them consistently, in my opinion.
Okay, so
we need to really define them, it seems, to be able to make this approach.
Let's define objective, and let me see if you've got a problem with this.
For me, objective means that kind of human opinion doesn't come into it. It's that like it can be independently verified by other people.
Well, no. See this is a big problem I have.
Okay.
By evidence.
Some people have said, like in my last video, I realised some people have claimed that it seems that I'm saying that for something to be objective, it must be verifiable or demonstrable. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, I didn't.
I'd agree with the first part of what you're saying. For something to be objectively true, it's as simple as this: it must be true or false. So objectively true or false, it must be true or false, regardless of human opinion about it. Whether or not humans want it to be true or not to be true.
Yes.
That
or their state of conviction.
or their state of conviction, precisely. So objective, I suppose I would define something to be objectively true or false. It must be true or false, regardless of human conviction.
Of what you think.
Yes. Now,
I want to point out something that I noticed in the video, and I just want to be aware of it again. There's two types of feelings. One is what we're experiencing. I would argue that is objective. It's verifiable.
Of course.
Yeah.
One of them is
but
conviction.
hold on, because verifiable is not the same as objective. That's not the same thing.
Okay, so let's take your definition of objective.
Yeah.
You do it one more time, so we've definitely got.
So for something to be objectively true or false, it must be true or false, independent of human conviction about.
So, for example, we could say that the Earth revolving around the Sun is an objective fact because the Earth does revolve around the Sun, regardless of whether we believe in the.
But more than that. Well, that's the thing. More than that, it's not necessarily the case, because even if we didn't know that, we could say that it is either objectively true or false that the Earth is in motion relative to the Sun.
Yeah.
Even if we didn't know whether it actually was.
But that's only if you assume the laws of logic, right? Which is a good thing to do. I'm not knocking it.
Yes, I suppose, but you just said that the laws of logic are not a product of the human mind.
No. As far as this isn't a product of the human mind, neither is the laws of logic.
Yeah, but how do you know that?
I don't know it to 100% certainty, but it doesn't cause this existential nihilism that it does in you.
Okay, but that's not the source of my nihilism, because I have the same.
This cup is not the source.
It's not the source. Of my nihilism. Look, I have the same conviction. I think we really need to clear this up. This is going to be really messy, but let's try and clear this up.
I think that's good.
So I have the same assumptions that you do about things like sense experience.
Right.
So the problem that a lot of people have had with my subjective experience of morality is they've said things like, and you said this to me too, you said, well, if you're going to say that morality is grounded in subjectivity, then everything's grounded in subjectivity, because how can you know anything for absolutely certain? Now, I would argue that even with the same assumptions about sense experience and the laws of logic, for instance, I can still say that there is no objective morality, and consequently that there's no objective purpose. So, let's assume, for the purpose of argument, that we can trust things like the laws of logic and our sense experience.
I can't grant you that without granting you other factors.
Okay, but would you say if you can't grant that, then
put it this way: how do you know that the laws of non-contradiction, the three laws, logic itself? How do you know?
But if you can't grant that, if I said I can't, that would be the end of it.
Yes.
So and we'd have to say that there really is no way to talk about purpose.
No, but you do have an answer for it. I have an answer for why I can account for it.
What's your answer for it?
But first of all, the point I really want to get across is that, I'll answer your question. The way I look at it is, yes, I can only know that I'm conscious. That's the only thing I know with certainty. I don't know that I inhabit this body. I don't know that I'm sat here with you. I don't actually know if this is a cup. All of this could be I could be in a van. Okay. But I have to work with what I've got. And there's a difference between a statement such as this is a cup and this is an elephant. And the way that we go around that is we see what is objective, a different definition of objective, which is what is verifiable to other people and to other consciousness, if there was others, based on evidence that can be repeated.
I have a big problem with that.
Yeah.
If you're going to say that objectivity requires verification, then what about,
No,
big difference.
I don't think it requires verification, but I think it can be verified. Is that?
Yeah. For you to say that something is objective, you need objective verification. There's a difference. So, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm convinced, this cup either exists or does not exist. But the only way I can demonstrate that to you, the only way I can have those conversations is through my subjective vision.
Okay, I agree. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Let's grant that assumption. Let's grant that assumption. I would say that in the same sense that you can say that cup either exists or does not exist, I think it's also reasonable to say that a moral statement cannot be true or false.
Why is it you're allowed to say those statements on both of those factors?
Well, I'm working in your framework here. The framework that you just put forward, I'm saying within that framework that you have just put forward, we can say that cup either exists or does not exist, right? Yeah. But I think in the same sense, you cannot use the same set of assumptions that you've just used to justify the truth or falsity of moral claims or claims about purpose. This is probably my central premise.
It seems that you've got into moral nihilism because of epistemological nihilism. Would that be a fair assumption there? Because you're switching between knowledge and morality, and they really don't need to interlink.
Yeah.
Like, we should have the conversation about knowledge before we have a conversation about morality, because we can't say about how we know something until we've agreed on what knowledge is.
Well,
for example, I'd say that, like, just in kind of my definitions, I don't know if you guys would agree with this, but I would say that we can objectively say this cup exists because we can verify it without our opinion kind of coming into it. We can, we can touch it, we can see it, we can get other people to touch it and see it, we can perform experiments on it, we can see how it responds to forces and things like that. And if you do want to bring morality into this, then we can kind of objectively I guess see the influence of our decisions and how they affect other people. Right. So objectively we can...
I wanted to add sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Notice that her definition of objective didn't require absolute knowledge, right?
Yeah, and I don't think it does.
Oh, okay. Because that's an important factor to recognise, because if we use that definition, you would agree that's objectively a cup, right?
Yes.
Okay, I would as well.
Right, okay, so shall we...
Whereas subjectively, it's a nice cup. That's the difference, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's horrible. Okay. But when it comes to something more abstract, such as the laws of logic, the reason we agree, the reason we are convinced that is objectively the case, is for the same reasons. You don't get to start with that. Your starting point is personal. It's your experience with the world. The only reason you accept the laws of logic is because the objective evidence, using her definition, is there for it immediately.
But would that not be just the perfect explanation of why the nihilistic philosophy is correct? Because every single thing you know or think you know could be wrong. There's no way to verify it. There's no way to prove that it's objective.
So there's a difference between saying because you've already said this exists independent of your mind. That's your state of conviction, at least, right?
Yes.
Sorry, spider on me.
So you've already said that this cup exists independent of your mind. This is the star of the video, by the way.
Yeah, well,
Beautiful.
available at teespring.com/.
This has all been an advertisement. There's no meaning for
This video is brought to you by. It's like I forgot to say the veganism video that's brought to us by Richmond Sausages. Sponsor.
Yeah, exactly. What's abortion brought? Abortion
Planned
has been
Parenthood.
brought by Ben Shapiro.
Yes.
Let's just open with an advert.
Okay, wait, can I put him in the tags now that we've mentioned?
Yes, you can.
Yeah,
okay.
That's
there
what
you go.
That's what I do with Jordan Peterson.
Well, look, let's not get sidetracked here. You were about to make a point.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the different types of nihilism that we have on the table at the moment. We've got
Yes.
moral
Yeah.
nihilism, existential nihilism. I keep forgetting that third one. What is it?
Epistemological.
Yeah.
The epistemological one is to do with knowledge, right? So you say that this cup exists independent of us being here. That's an epistemological claim.
No, I'm not. If you're going to press me, I'm saying I can't say that.
Okay.
I'm saying I cannot say that. I think we agree on that. You can't say that as an objective certainty.
I think potentially I'd argue that, like, I agree with you that, you know, the only thing we can maybe be certain of is, I say maybe, the only thing we can be certain of is, you know, like, that we exist and everything else is...
Existence.
Yeah, so I agree with that we can't be 100% sure on everything else, but I think for the sake of kind of arguments and conversation, we can say that within what we experience of the world, we can objectively know. And so it's kind of like, it's like another level within, so it's kind of like your, what is it, epistemological nihilism, there we go. Yeah. So I feel like that's a kind of like big overarching issue, but then if we say, okay, well, if we can't be 100% sure of this, but we can, you know, we to the best of our ability, we can be sure that we all share these same experiences, then we can look at...
how do you know that we share these experiences?
So
again, it's to the best of our...
Two definitions of objective, and we need to split them, okay? One of them we say absolute. That means it exists, period. What I'm absolutely certain on is that I exist in some form. Yeah?
I don't know if I see that as a definition of objective.
No, but the reason I'm using that now, that for some people is an objective is a definition of objective. Some religious people would say it is absolutely the case that God exists, period. That's an absolute statement, independent of human opinion.
I think that view is necessarily objective, but I don't think it is the definition of objective.
No, it's not. But there's several definitions. Surely you recognise that there are many.
But I think there's only one helpful definition.
Not in philosophy. In philosophy, that one's useful.
I would say even in
philosophy, right?
Because if you're talking about if you want to use that definition of objective, then you may as well just say absolute.
Yeah. So the thing is that people, if you ask certain philosophers what they mean by objective, it honestly depends on the conversations they're having.
Okay, so why don't we really nail down what we mean by objective, and moving forward in this conversation, we mean that by objective. So
do you not think it's worth basically having a tentative name for both types, because they're going to necessarily...
Sure, yeah, that's a good idea, okay.
So that's what I was trying to
we could talk about, like, absolute objectivity and...
Yeah. Let's say absolute objectivity means that it is the case, end off. Doesn't matter about humans. Whereas objectivity is in, we agree that's a cup, we experience it, there's
verifiable objectivity.
That's scientific objectivity.
Scientific objectivity, I like that. But the problem with the first, if you're going to define objective as necessarily true, I think rather than just saying that, it needs to be necessarily true or false, because you can say that something is objectively false as much as you can say that something is objective.
So you say we know for certain, because there's no doubt about it that it doesn't exist.
So that's our definitions of objectivity. We've got two types. Moving forward, let's be careful to distinguish.
Absolutely, it's really important.
So I think it's worth saying that I agree with you, Stephen, in everything you've said. When you're talking about, what are we calling the first objectivity?
So
absolute objective. I cannot absolutely objectively say that this cup exists. However, if we leave it there, then we have to be nihilists. End of. Would you agree in the sense that...
It depends on the type of nihilism, doesn't it?
Well, how can you not be, say, a moral nihilist if you are an epistemological nihilist? How can you say that I can't know anything, but I can know that moral claims are true or false?
No, I can know something, I just can't know everything. I have levels of certainty.
But you can only know that one thing. You can only know the fact that you exist.
The only absolute knowledge I have is that I exist.
Okay.
And then I necessarily find myself in a world in which some things make sense, some things don't. And they do so according to laws of logic. They do so according to peer-reviewed science, etc.
But I have to press you on this. I have to press you on this.
I think just on a very personal level for me, like, I have to kind of like take everything. Wait, what are the words I want to use here? On like a very personal level for me, I have to look at the world in terms of what I can experience and what other people in it can experience. So whether epistemological nihilism is true or not shouldn't really matter in the rest of the equation, because
it matters on a philosophical level, and that's why I kind of want to cover it now. And I do plan to get it out of the way and just talk about scientific nihilism here. But the question I would ask you then is how on earth can you know that we all experience the same thing? I mean, how do you know that?
No, go ahead.
But let's save that for a moment, because I just really want to press you on this.
If I can answer you with just words and then we can skip it, it would be she knows it because of scientific objectivity.
Right.
She's not claiming to know it absolutely.
Do you think that once you admit absolute nihilism, that there is no absolute objectivity, that everything you say about scientific objectivity has to be taken with a grain of salt?
Only as much of a grain of salt as everything else.
Yes, everything else.
Including the laws of logic.
But this is my problem. So
would you throw the laws of logic in there? That's an important point.
I kind of have to ask.
How can you say that's absolute?
It's difficult to. It's difficult. It depends on what you mean. So.
This cup can't be a cup and not a cup.
I don't want to sound like stupid here, but in the real world, does that grain of salt matter that much?
No, it doesn't.
If we're aware of it, then we can say we can account for it, but it doesn't have to be the biggest influence on everything.
Maybe the best thing to say on that would be it doesn't matter for practical purposes, but it does matter for the philosopher.
Yeah,
but there's just the very fact that you can say it doesn't matter for practical purposes is based on a whole heap of assumptions.
What assumptions?
So why would you say it doesn't matter for practical purposes?
For the same reason it doesn't matter that you don't have free will. For practical purposes.
And why doesn't that matter?
Because you have the illusion, the experience is there, it can be sufficiently true, if that makes sense, even though it's not actually true.
But how can you know any of that if you can't know anything?
Well, you're just going back to the absolute.
But that's what I'm saying. So once you, that's why I'm saying.
Because
once you've
regardless of whether or not we know it, our life doesn't change.
Before we move on, are the laws of logic an absolute objectivity or just a scientific?
By the laws of logic, do you mean
that this cup is?
Let me draw an analogy with maths. So if you were asking me, does maths exist? Do you mean the kind of mathematical language that's been constructed?
Let's use the law of non-contradiction just because it's easier to do. This can't be a cup and also not a cup. That's according to scientific objectivism. Is that also the case?
A cannot be true and also not true.
Yes, A cannot. Yeah, exactly. Is that? Where does that fall in your purview? Can you say that absolutely, or is it only scientifically objective rather than absolutely objective?
Well, if you're going to say that for something to be scientifically objective, it must be verifiable.
So, forget that. Just go for the absolute.
No, but this is important, because if you're going to say that scientific objectivity is to do with verification, laws of logic are not verifiable. They're logical.
Logic's verifiable. You can see whether or not logic is consistent, whether or not it does produce the right things.
But you can't verify it to the fullest extent. This is something A.J. Ayer said.
It works in
look,
abstract.
you can't say that you cannot demonstrate through verification that A cannot be true and also not true. You can only use the laws of logic to prove that.
Yes.
So scientific objectivity wouldn't be able to verify the laws of logic.
If I tipped water in this,
and
it fills it up, and then next time it shoots it out over there, that's defying logic. That's an objective test that I'm doing.
That's not defying logic. That's not defying logic. That's defying the laws of the laws of science. It's not defying the laws of logic. There is no logical contradiction with you putting some water and it flying away. That's not logically impossible.
If we found this cup and it was both a cup and not a cup, and that was verifiable, what would that mean?
Well, that couldn't be verifiable, because that couldn't exist. But we know that couldn't exist not because we've verified it, but because we've used the laws of logic to reach that conclusion, right?
So what I'm saying is that here we have an example where you are, through experiencing something that violates the laws of logic, that's something that you're seeing, that you can verify by getting me to see, that we can verify by tests.
But you couldn't see that because even if that were the case, that wouldn't be viewable.
Why do you accept the laws of logic?
Well, this is what I'm trying to get to the heart of, because what I'm trying to argue here is that you can't justify the laws of logic through scientific objectivity. If we're going to break up objectivity, so if you can't do that, then the only way that you can verify the laws of objectivity is through this absolute objectivity that we've constructed. But if you're saying that when we're talking about absolute objectivity, we can never prove its existence or prove its validity,
well, then
you cannot prove the laws of logic. So you're also making an assumption here, because you can't verify the laws of logic. I trust you believe in the laws of logic.
Yes.
But that can't be scientifically verified, and you don't. Even if it could, you don't believe in the laws of logic because they've been scientifically verified.
I think it can be scientifically verified.
How could you?
But it doesn't need to be.
So why doesn't it need to be?
Well, when you perform any scientific test, when there's any kind of scientific observation, if that observation, all of them show that rule, those law of non-contradiction, for example, is the case. Therefore, you have scientific verification.
Okay, but
for
just because it's worked every time so far, does that mean it will continue to work in the future?
No, but again, I reject this absolute knowledge thing.
It's
you
kind
work
of
with what you have to.
Yeah, with like scientific objectivity and stuff like that, it's kind of, especially when it comes to like theories and rules and laws and stuff like that, we go with them until they're proven otherwise, right? Like, we accept that gravity's like a force that's pulling us towards the centre of the earth and stuff like that. Like, we accept that until it's proven otherwise.
Yes, and I would agree.
Wouldn't it be the same with logic?
Well, this is the problem. This is the thing. If you're going to say that something is logically true, then that means it will be true in all cases. It's not a case. Logical truths.
You're saying it's like question begging.
Logical truths are not saying that A cannot be true and not true at the same time until we're proven otherwise. It's like it cannot be true and also not true.
Did the laws of logic exist before we started talking about them?
Yes.
So that means they existed in a plane that you're necessarily personally experiencing, and then you're using scientific objectivism to verify them.
Yeah.
The laws of logic, this is my point, the laws of logic fall, the reason why we think of them the way we do is because that's the way we experience it. That is behind that wall. It's necessarily viewed through our senses, and it's verifiable in the scientifically objective sense, not in the absolute.
I don't think you can say that the laws of logic are scientifically objective, because, like you say,
I understand the focus on words, but considering the context of our conversation, you know what I'm saying.
Can I put it another way to you?
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible that the laws of logic could be proven wrong?
Possible. Yes.
Possible, but not probable.
And what I mean by the laws of logic are not our understanding of the laws of logic, but the actual laws of logic.
You are, to say that, you are assuming it exists.
And would you say it exists?
Not with absolute knowledge. Because I can't. I have to view it from the senses.
I'd put the laws of logic on the same plane as, like, you know, basic rules of maths and basic, like, forces of physics and things like that.
Those are so different to me. The laws of maths and the laws of physics are so different.
But they'd still exist if we didn't name and talk about them.
Mathematics is analytic. It's a product. It's a product of reflection.
Yeah.
It's like 2 + 2 = 4. Not because we can go out and test if you put two things with two things it makes four things, but because if you understand 2 to mean what we all mean by 2, if that is your concept of 2, then it is just necessarily true that 2 + 2 = 4. That can't be proven wrong.
Under that definition,
that cannot be proven. That cannot be proven
wrong. I don't know,
wrong.
because I think maths and logic are like linked very closely.
So do I. I'm saying it's true of logic as well. But you've just said. So let's say that. So you agree with me with the maths thing there, yeah?
What that it's absolute?
That it's absolutely objectively true.
We don't know
that 2 + 2 = 4.
We don't know that because everything goes through our senses, including the laws of logic.
That doesn't go through our senses.
But it does. In order for you to have any conception of it at all, Alex, you have to view them through your senses. You have to hear about it. You have to see it. You have to touch it if you can. You can't very much touch math.
Well.
But, look,
I don't think that's the case.
This seems to all come down to this subjectivism.
Yeah.
And I'm with you, but you're not throwing in math out as well as logic. So let me.
It's fine. Wait for it to pass.
So let me try and get to the heart of this with a simple question.
Okay.
How do you know absolutely that the laws of logic are true?
I don't.
You don't.
I don't. But you seem to be claiming that you do.
No.
Okay. So I actually maybe I've got you wrong there.
So if scientific objectivism,
if that's what you're saying, then if you're both willing to admit that you can't know as an absolute certainty that the laws of logic are true, and that everything we could possibly know are effectively based on the laws of logic being true, that at a philosophical level, nihilism is correct.
No. Epistemological nihilism.
Right. This is what I meant.
Epistemological nihilism says everything cannot be true. I disagree.
No, it doesn't mean it can't. It doesn't mean it can't be true.
Sorry. It means everything is not ultimately knowable. Would you accept that for epistemological?
Okay, sure, yeah.
I've said I know for certain that I exist in some form, so I don't even fit that definition of nihilism. All I've done is I say that I know I exist in some form.
How do you know you exist?
Because I'm conscious.
How do you know that your consciousness is congruent to your existence?
The thing is I experience something. It could not be this world. I could not have this body. I could not have these. There's many things that could be here, but the essence, the crux, that experience, that cannot necessarily be an illusion.
You know I agree with you here.
Yeah.
But do you see what I'm saying when I say that this is kind of like the way that I'm seeing the laws of logic, in the sense that you can't demonstrate that you exist.
Not. I can in the objective sense.
It is just logically true that you exist.
No, because I don't know that I definitely exist, so I wouldn't say that. What I'd say is, in the scientific sense of objectivity, I can demonstrate it. In the absolute sense, I can't.
Would you say that you absolutely objectively believe that you exist? As in, I think, therefore I am, and that's an absolute.
As in,
objectivity.
I exist as something.
Yes.
Yes.
But that's the thing. So how can you know that if you're not allowing for things like the laws of logic?
What, not allowing for laws of logic?
Yeah.
Because the illusion, it cannot be an illusion, can it?
Why not?
Because you're experiencing something. How
something has to experience the illusion.
But do you see
seeing something for what it isn't?
I agree.
Yeah.
I completely agree with everything you're saying. But do you see how you need to assume some sense of logical?
It's not an
truth.
assumption. It's an action. Okay. How about this way?
You need to assume that there are logical pathways that you can take in order to even make that claim. Because the only reason that you can say that it's logically, the only reason that you can say that I know I exist because I can't both experience and not experience, that's a law of logic.
Well, that might be the case, but that doesn't. You still exist in some form.
Right, but that's based upon a law of logic.
It's not though. So if you take the bare minimum facts of everything, you agree with me that you exist in some form. That's the starting point. Everything that you verify about the world outside, including logic, everything that you see, the maths, the science, this table, this conversation, me, all of that comes from your senses. It's that wall that makes things, makes everything past that wall falls into epistemological nihilism because you can't know it for certain.
I just really, really, really want to press you on this.
Absolutely.
I can't stress how much I agree with you.
Should we do it through premises?
Premises?
Yeah.
Which premises?
Premise one is that you're conscious.
Okay, yeah, let's do it that way, yes. Okay, premise one is that I'm conscious.
Yeah, and I haven't thought this through, so I may use the wrong words. Do bear with me. Premise one is that you're conscious.
Yeah.
Premise two is that in order to perceive anything, you have to do so through your senses.
Okay. I don't know about.
Shall I give you the rest, and then you can come back and see what you've got?
I would agree with that.
If you're including like experience of self as a sense.
Experience could be you experience this world and everything included in it.
If you're just including experience of self as a sense, then okay, fine.
I see. You can see it in as a sense.
Yeah,
okay.
but I see what you're saying. So yeah, okay, I'll grant you that.
Someone didn't watch our podcast episode on the senses.
I must admit I didn't.
Lots of people didn't. So yeah, we've got premise one, which is that you're conscious.
Okay.
Premise two could be that everything that you observe, all of what you're experiencing, this conversation, etc., that cup, is through your senses.
Okay.
Third would be that your senses are fallible.
Okay.
But they could be wrong. And that's where nihilism comes in. The epistemological, because they are fallible, because they can be mistaken, that's where this whole situation comes from. I think me and Rachel are with you there. It's just it seems that you somehow put, here's the wall, not quite Trump's wall, but it's a wall. Okay, you have consciousness. Me and Rachel place the laws of logic here because in order to verify them, in order to know about them at all, we have to use this wall of sense to see it. You, for some reason, are putting it behind, so that they are necessarily true before you even observe through these senses.
But would you not say that it's also necessary to experience yourself in order to know that you exist?
And now you're thinking, what is yourself? You know, because you could consciously conceive of yourself as being what you're not.
The thing that I'm trying,
you exist in
but this is the thing. I'm trying to press you on this because I think this is crucial. Because, like I say, I can't stress how much I agree with you on that and agree with Descartes. But I want you to recognise that there is a very subtle assumption within that.
What do you define an assumption to be? Something assumed of no reason, no good reason.
Or maybe assumption is the wrong word. There is an element of that rests on,
perhaps an axiom.
There is an element of that logic that cannot be verified, that cannot be proven. Like so it's something that you are assuming because it can't be verified.
Proven to what standard of objective?
Either.
You can prove it objectively in the scientific sense.
Let's tackle this at a different angle. I don't want to get too mixed up in word salad here. Look.
The word salad matters here because jumping across from those is where this problem's coming in. But this is your conversation. I'll follow you down whatever rabbit hole you want to go down.
Okay, I just think
you say that I'm on the right. What are you getting of this so far? Or am I being obtuse? If I am,
no, I don't think you're being obtuse. I just think that you might think that I'm taking you down a different path. So I don't necessarily think it's necessary.
I see.
So let me really break this down. So you know when you're doing philosophy and you can ask questions that seem ridiculous, but they're not because you're doing philosophy. It's like you can ask things like, why is good really good? When you're in philosophy, like, you just take that for granted. Like, you can ask questions like that. Let me try on something like that. I'm really going to just keep asking you questions. So
I do want to take you down a question route as well, because
we can do that next.
I want to do that next.
I want to know how you know that you exist. As simply as you can break it down. How do you know that you exist?
So the axiomatic fact of the matter is that I'm conscious.
How do you know that?
It's self-evident, which is incredibly.
But why is it the case that if something is self-evident, then it is true?
I don't know, because in order to know, I'd have to use my senses to perceive something. And
right.
the
fact that he's even perceiving anything, the fact that he's.
But here's perhaps the assumption. How do you know that because you're perceiving anything that you exist? And let me stress again, I agree with you. I just want us to understand why it is that we believe this.
So how do you get there?
Well, because of the fact, I think I'm allowed to do that because I'm granting that things like the laws of logic aren't necessarily dependent on human opinion. So what I'm trying to say is if I was somebody who was unconvinced, if I was someone who was saying, no, well, I don't see how you could possibly know that you exist, what would you do to prove that to me? Forgetting everything that I've said about laws of logic, so don't cater to sort of what I've said, but how would you try and explain
I would do more research
exist?
into how Descartes approached it and others, because they are.
But how would you approach it? I mean, you're convinced of it.
Right now, I would say, are you experiencing anything? Therefore, something's on.
How do you know you're experiencing anything?
You can just ask. So if I ask you, I actually don't know if you're experiencing something.
But how do you know that you're experiencing anything?
It seems to be the only thing that's self-evident.
Seems to be.
Yes.
So how do you know that it actually is the case?
Because I don't have to see through my senses that my consciousness is a thing.
Because what it seems to me, and this is the reason why I agree with you, is because it would be logically contradictory.
So you think the laws of logic are the first thing before you exist?
They have to be if you're going to make this claim, because the only reason that you can say that I think therefore I am is because it would be logically contradictory for me to say that I experience, that I'm experiencing non-experience. That's just logically contradictory, and that's why Descartes said that you have to exist in some form in order to think at all, or to even be deluded, is because of the fact that it would be logically contradictory if you could experience something when experience did not exist. right? That's logically contradictory. And so I can say, because that's logically contradictory, that can't be the case. But you can't say that if you're not going to grant that the laws of logic don't come first. So how else do you possibly justify that?
Let's say you were in a vat.
Yes.
And you woke up from that vat. And it turns out, you tell me if you think this is even possible, you wake up from that vat, the laws of physics are nothing like what you've experienced in that vat.
That's perfectly possible.
The laws of math is nothing like what you experienced in that.
Depends what you mean by the laws of math.
So this is probably the element which we should focus on, because there's no reason to say the laws of logic would be different there.
Well, this is the case I'd make. I would say that if I woke up in a vat, the laws of science could be different, like the strength of gravity could be different.
I mean, strength of gravity, of course, is essentially to do with the objects and how they interact,
Yeah.
but like, I mean, fundamentally different, like completely different, out of this world different.
Like,
Something you
gravity
can't
doesn't
see.
even exist.
Yeah, like,
That
but the
kind
thing
of
is, that's not a logical impossibility, and so I can conceive that that would be possible.
Okay, so if you was to use our logic now to define it in a way which is contradictory, that is impossible, are you saying that that couldn't exist outside of the vat?
Wait, try that again, one more time.
Good point. So you have laws of gravity, such as gravity.
I just want to make sure I'm getting you right. It's not that you fully explained it.
So, in order to say that something is mutually contradictory, that something contradicts itself, or that it's impossible, you're relying on the laws of logic, which I'm saying is outside of this vat. So I can't accept your argument because it's inside the vat.
How do you know it's outside of the vat?
Because the only way I know about the laws of logic is by perceiving the world and seeing that it's objectively the case is in scientifically objective.
Okay, bear with me, but how do you know that?
I don't know. How do I know?
So I asked you, how do you know that the laws of logic are outside of the vat? And what was your answer?
The fundamental axiom is that I exist in some form, which is the consciousness. My conception of humans, my conception of gravity, my conception of all laws, my conception of math.
So,
and no, wait. My conception of the laws of non-contradiction, of the logical laws, I should say. All of that I only know about in any possible way by perceiving it through my senses.
Okay.
Not necessarily just my eyes. It could be whatever we define a sense as, and as you've said before, there's many different types of senses. Because I only know about it through the senses, it's necessary that my starting point has to be the consciousness. So I have to grant that just as math could be wrong, as we've said, but it likely isn't, it's not scientific.
I don't know that it can be wrong. But
yeah, but in the absolute
But
sense,
look, I have no problem with you saying something like... I have no problem with you saying something like your conception of the laws of logic are not objectively verifiable. But if you're going to say that, then I think you also have to say that your very existence is also not objectively verifiable.
Not in the absolute sense.
Because if you're going to say I think therefore I am, and I'm going to ask you why, and you're going to say because the very fact that I experience anything means that there has to be something to be doing the experiencing.
I don't even have to use any logic. I can just say it is. I'm experiencing something.
But I'm asking you to tell me how you know that that's true.
This is why I'm saying it's an axiomatic fact, in the sense it just is. Now that is incredibly...
Okay, but why can't it? So
it's not a logical answer because it doesn't sit in logic.
If it just is, why can't it be, but also not be? Why can't it also be true that you don't exist at the same time?
I guess it could be.
So it could be true that you don't exist.
But the thing is that I myself am perceiving it as I do exist.
Would you say it's possible that
I wouldn't know if that's also the case.
Is it possible that you don't exist? Put it that way.
Depends on what we mean by exist, of course. In the way
I mean exist in any sense.
What possible? I don't exist in any sense.
Is it possible that you do not exist in any sense?
I don't think so.
Right. So and that's the impression that you've been giving me. But how do you know that? Because I've just said, well, you just said a second ago that you could not exist. But from what you're saying, it sounds like you're trying to say that it's not possible for you not to exist in some form.
What I'm saying is that my foundation, the thing that I'm most sure about, is that I exist in some form.
But you're not just saying you're most sure of that, you're saying that you know that.
Yes.
Okay.
So to the extent of I know anything, it's to the absolute.
No, but I'm not looking for, to the extent that I know anything, I know this is true. Like, do you know that is true full stop?
That I exist, period.
Yes, that you exist in some form.
In some form.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I would say that I feel the same. But this is what I'm saying. So you would say then it's impossible that you do not exist in some form.
Would I say that it's possible that I don't exist in some form?
It's impossible for you not to exist in some form. Would you agree with that?
I would say that in this state now, I exist, and I'm absolutely certain of that. But when you're bringing in the rule of the law of non-contradiction, is it possible that I don't exist in another state or at the same time? I would have to say that the starting point is just that I know that I exist. That's the only thing I can start with.
The fact that you say that you know that you exist definitely, you definitely exist, that means that it's also true that you can't not exist.
I disagree.
No, yeah, I disagree.
Why is that?
Because you can't know. If the only thing we can fully know is that we exist, we don't really know what it means to not exist, if that makes sense. So we don't know what it...
Okay.
Also, take atoms.
No, I...
No, take atoms.
Actually, that's a good point.
And this is probably a good route to go down.
I know you're going
You can
with
say,
this.
you are at this atom at this one time is here. It cannot be elsewhere and not there at the same time. Well, quantum mechanics gives you a middle finger. It goes, I don't give a about the laws of logic. This is the case. So there's everything to say that that could be the case with my consciousness.
Okay, so,
all I know is that I am at this time in that area in some form of existence. I'm not making any other claims than that.
Let me rephrase things, because we can just take this further.
I'm just curious. What do you think of that example? Do you think that's fallacious?
I think that's fine. I see what you're saying now. It's not necessarily the case if you say that you definitely exist. The corollary is not necessarily that it's impossible for you not to exist if you're not granting the laws of logic. Seems absurd, but if you're not granting the laws of logic, then I think you can justifiably say, I know I exist, but I don't know that I also don't not exist.
Yeah, so
Right.
the knowledge claim about not existing.
So let me put it another way to you then. To say that you exist in some form as an objective fact, would you therefore say that it's...
Absolute fact. Just keep
Sure.
atoms, yeah.
Is it impossible for you to not exist in any form? Period, including the form that you think you do exist.
Because the fact that I exist at that one point.
So it's like, if I made the claim, it is impossible for you to exist in any form whatsoever, including the form that you believe you do exist in. Do you agree with that claim?
Not intuitively, no.
But would you say that that's a false claim?
I would obviously do necessary research, but as of now, no.
Yeah,
it's not just
right, but why not? Why can't it be the case?
Because my axiomatic fact is my experience.
Sure,
so I'm conscious.
Sure, but why can't it be the case simultaneously that you do exist, and also that you cannot exist in any form whatsoever, including that form in which you do exist?
So we've got to the point where we could say that I exist and that I don't exist. That's possible.
No, not just that you exist and you don't exist. You exist and you also cannot exist in any shape or form.
Yes, I would say that can't
happen.
Yes, yeah.
Why not?
When you're asking me a question about knowledge, when you're asking me about a question of understanding these things, I'm giving you what I understand of this universe that we experience.
Right.
I'm already heavily enveloped with the laws of logic that we experience. I'm already heavily enveloped with the objective science that we have. So the ultimate answer is I've got no idea about how things could manifest outside of this, and neither does anyone else.
I don't know. I don't know is a fine thing to say. But
I know,
but I wouldn't say I don't know, and you didn't just say I don't know.
Yes.
You just said that it's not possible.
Yes.
I need to be very. I don't want to confuse people with the terms here because this gets very murky. You said that if I were to say that you both exist, and as well as that, it is impossible for you to exist in any form, including that form in which you do exist, that's impossible. But the only way you can say that that's impossible is because it's a logical contradiction.
No, I don't agree.
You weren't saying it's impossible though.
No.
You were saying it's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who said that is possible?
Yeah.
The
Because we don't know.
fact is that I exist. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
There's nothing I can say about the laws of logic, about whether or not they function that way or the way that we experience them until I have sensory experience.
Okay.
And that wall itself is nihilistic.
Yeah. So for me, it's kind of like almost like a big Venn diagram where like there's kind of, so imagine a big circle, and then in this circle the only thing we can absolutely know for sure is that we exist, but it is possible that outside of this Venn diagram we also do not exist, if that makes sense. So there's that, but then in a ever so slightly smaller circle there's like all the stuff that we experience and perceive and that we think other people experience and perceive, and that's like the scientific objectivity. And so everything else we talk about from there, everything else we talk about meaning of life and morals and maths and logic and physics and stuff like that, all comes within this ever so slightly smaller circle, if that makes sense.
Which is
It does make sense,
senses.
but I just,
Yeah, that's just the way I view things.
It's so
Yeah.
tricky to see. I'm trying to see if I can find a way in which I can make this work. That something can be true and also impossible.
So how maybe let's flip the script. How do you know that laws of logic are true?
Well, okay, I want to be careful here. When you say the laws of logic, I don't want to get myself across wrong here. If I say that the laws of logic are true, I don't mean necessarily that the laws of logic that we understand, that we know of, the laws of logic that we've written down in our textbooks are true.
But you certainly mean that one of them is.
What I mean
That's
is
what you've
that
been using to
there
berate
are
us.
some true logical
And we know one of them,
facts,
don't we? Because that's you've been using that to have a quarrel with our axiomatic assumptions, as you may call it.
I suppose because
So how do you know that one is true?
because when it comes to logic, you're dealing in definitions and reflection, and so it's not something that requires verification to prove true or false.
So hang on. So laws of logic, you're just
Wait.
saying are definitional.
If it's about definition and reflection, then it's reflection on the world that we experience.
No, I mean like
No?
philosophical reflection. I mean.
The
But
point
that's
is
still based on
you
the
made
world
a
we experience,
statement,
right?
and- yeah, you made a statement where you were using a law of logic to try and.
Which
very-
statement? About
You were saying that you cannot exist and also not exist at all. That's a law of logic. I think it would fall into the law of contradiction, but a bit extended. I don't know
okay,
the
yeah, no,
intent.
that's
How do you know that law of
fine.
logic's true? Because if you give me any other answer than something that goes through that wall of senses, you're in the same position as us.
Okay, but can you see? Can you see it? I'll grant you that. And the thing is, I really feel like in my head, I feel like I'm beginning to formulate a way in which I could explain why I would think that the laws of physics, the laws of logic, could be true without being able to verify them. But I don't want to try that now until I've thought about it enough.
Right?
But let's say that I say that no, I can't do that. Right? Do you not see how this leads to nihilism?
Existential nihilism, yes.
But do you not? Well, I'd say epistemological nihilism too. Surely.
Sorry.
Yes,
Epistemological is the one I
this
meant.
is something that I wanted to press you on earlier. Like
I want to bring this back to purpose and to morality.
Yes.
Okay?
So can
What
I
go
can
on.
take you down a path that way. I don't understand how you can be an epistemological nihilist and not automatically be, say, a moral nihilist as well.
Do you think there's such a thing as science?
Well, I think there is, yes, but if you're going to be an epistemological nihilist, then the correct answer is I don't know. And so to
Worse than that, would be
and so-
like,
I can't know.
Yeah.
And so therefore, for every single question you could possibly answer, including moral questions, which you believe are scientific,
Yes. In
The
the first objective sense that we
the
just
correct answer is always I can't know.
Yeah,
No.
but-
The
No,
correct
but you're
answer.
not. Yeah, but you're not an epistemological nihilist because you think that you know you exist.
Actually, great point, which I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier. So already I'm not, but I understand the point you're making.
But okay, so
Fine,
you're an
but
epistemological nihilist
when
to
I
an
say
extent.
it is objectively
Yeah.
wrong to torture kids, this is relating to the scientific definition that we use in pretty much every area of conversation. It's philosophy that deals with this absolute.
Wait, how do you?
When we
But I
talk?
don't want this isn't like a moral
Yeah.
discussion, but let me take you down to the purpose thing, okay? You've got epistemological nihilism, which we've done a good job of hitting. I'm sure you guys would agree. When it comes to purpose, which is to do with existential, why do you get up in the morning? Because this is something that a lot of people suffer with, and this is why I want to bring it back, because a lot of people, when they lose a religion, they think, oh, okay, I don't have an existential purpose, why don't I just lay in bed? There's no purpose at all. Where do you, unintended, lie on that?
For me, this comes within this inner circle, inside the stuff that we perceive and others perceive and that we can objectively, scientifically perceive. You know, it's... I want to say it's not necessarily separate, but it's independent of the whole can we know all this stuff or not kind of thing, because it's like, okay, well, within what we can know because of what our senses perceive, and in this kind of world that we perceive, whether it is true or not in the grand scheme of things, within what we perceive, you know, do we have a purpose and a meaning and so on? Like, it's within that.
Okay,
Outside
this,
of that,
this is
I
why,
agree, we can't know.
This is why I struggle to answer the question,
Yeah.
because I can't just pull myself out of it. I can't just say, well, you know, forgetting the fact that I can't actually know anything, can I know this? I can't do that. I have to say that if I can't know anything, if I'm an epistemological... This is why I wanted to press you on this, because if I am an epistemological nihilist, if I have to admit that there's no way that I cannot know anything...
Do you know you're conscious?
Well... Are you asking me if I know that I exist?
You exist, yeah.
I would say yes, probably for the same reasons that you do.
Right.
But like you say, that's the only thing that you can know.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about things like getting out of bed in the morning, if I'm going to be an epistemological nihilist, perhaps barring that one piece of knowledge, then I have to say, I don't know. I have to say, I cannot answer that question. Because even if I could answer that question,
Would it not
I
be
cannot
more
know if I'm
accurate to
true or
say-
false.
More accurate to say is that I cannot give you a 100% definitive answer, just as I can't give you a 100%
No.
definitive answer in anything.
No, it would be, I can't even, me even answering that question makes no sense.
Can't you just say, I can't give you, like you say, a 100% answer in the entire grand scheme of everything ever, but within this world that I perceive and everyone else perceives, this is what I think. Because surely the world that you perceive also exists because you're perceiving it.
I could do that, but it wouldn't be philosophically satisfying. It would be like me saying, like, well, I guess...
what
But honestly, what
do you mean?
what's
What
the
It's not
point?
philosophically satisfying.
I don't mean philosophically satisfying in the sense that it makes me feel good. I mean in the sense that I philosophically believe it.
Yeah, but so what? What's the matter with that?
Yeah, why is this necessary?
What do you mean?
Why is absolute knowledge necessary?
It's not about absolute knowledge. It's about...
Okay, but let's talk about, like, you know, these big philosophical things about does this exist, doesn't this exist? Let's be honest, in the world that you perceive day to day and the world that everyone else perceives day to day, why does it really matter? It honestly doesn't have an impact.
It doesn't matter. You were asking why you can't just say, well, in the universe that you do inhabit and do experience, why can't you just...
Like, okay, I get it, like, if you're, I guess, talking in, like, an academic setting or, like, something like that, but for the average person, or even if you just want to make the argument to say, like, okay, within the sphere I know, like, why does it matter if something is, like, philosophically sound or not?
It's like this. I mean, to ask why does it matter if something's philosophically sound? Because philosophy is the base of our thought, and so it has to be sound if we want to be sound people. It's like, do you believe that the criminal justice system should be designed in such a way that takes into account the non-existence of free will?
Yes.
Why? Why not just... the world, our experience is an experience of free will. We think we have free will. So why not just design the criminal justice system as that? Why does it matter?
Yeah, I disagree with you there, because I think the real life consequences as we experience them outweigh whether free will exists or not.
I see.
It's like, I think I said it to you guys the other day, like, you said, okay, if free will doesn't exist, then how can you justify locking people up? And I turned around and said,
No, I agree.
okay, that...
But
I turned around and said, like, okay, so if you have, like, a paedophile who molests children, and, you know, maybe he didn't choose to act that way because he doesn't have free will, but he should still be locked up so he doesn't hurt more children, right? Yeah. So
I agree with that.
I can't remember where this was going.
What I was trying to say was effectively, I think to ask why does it matter if we're being philosophically consistent, isn't that the whole goal of what we're doing here, what we're doing with these YouTube channels, what we're doing?
What matters is that we can get as close to truth as we can.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about free will, all of that, all of our conversation, all of the evidence we reference, anything and everything about that topic necessarily starts with that wall of experience
Okay.
you have. But when we speak about topics like that, notice that we don't drag it back to the philosophical underpinnings, because we work, if you will, on the assumption, if you'd like, that our experiences, the fact that they correlate, that there's something happening, and we say that this objective science seems to be working under this pretext, therefore let's now have these conversations. If we did this to every area of discourse, everything goes, and fine, that's fine. But to pick specific topics and apply it to it, such as morality, is a fatal mistake.
But this is the problem. You can't say it's a mistake, because the whole point, the whole.
But you know what I mean by mistake.
I do, but the whole point of the nihilistic philosophy is to say, well, unfortunately, that seems to be what we're going to have to do if we want to be consistent.
But you apply it to everything.
Yes.
Correct? Yeah.
That's what nihilism is. It's saying that everything, every single thing, the realm of morality, the realm of knowledge, the realm of everything, is just...
Nihilism is only saying that epistemological nihilism is saying that. When we come to about your purpose in life,
only if you step out of epistemological nihilism can you talk about purpose.
Yeah, because this is why it all falls into this purview. Like there is like a diagraph, there is some way of formulating this. But when somebody says to you, "I don't feel like I have a purpose," they're not telling you anything. A lot of the time, they're not referencing epistemological foundations. They're saying, "I don't have a purpose, an absolute purpose. I feel lost." So the answer to those people is to go, "Why do you get out of bed?" And if they say to you, "Oh, I'm just not going to get out of bed because I don't want to," you can say, "Good luck trying. You will, because you have built in you preferences and values, and you get your." You wait till you shit yourself 4 times. You're going to get up, and you have that kind of purpose, even though it's rudimentary.
But that's not the purpose that they seek.
No, but if they're saying, "I want a purpose to life," there are objective science. There are objective reasons for it in the scientific sense of objective.
But that's not what they're looking for. We both know that's not what they're looking for.
No, some are. Some people are, and some people don't know that that's what they're looking for. They're mistaking that for what they've always thought. They're mistaking that for what they've always thought that purpose must be, and that is that they've always thought that it must be necessarily absolute and something that encompasses everything. The problem is that is not necessary to have a purpose. Now, if someone does insist, "That's what I want," the answer is tough. So far as we know, that's just not the case.
Right, exactly.
Just as I would say, tough, you're not going to live after you're dead.
Exactly.
Because that's what we objectively, in the scientific sense, understand. That's what's showing it. Could I say it with absolute knowledge? No.
But that is exactly my point. It's like, there is no purpose. Tough.
But what if
No, there is no absolute purpose.
Yeah.
Tough.
But I think it's perfectly okay for people to create their own purpose, to come up with their own ideas for things. Like if I say I want the purpose of my life to be happy, to make other people happy, to entertain people with like YouTube stuff. I just, that's what I want, and I do that.
If we're going to be philosophical about this, why does it matter that you're happy?
Exactly, that's the point. Why does the philosophy matter if I'm happy?
It matters to her.
That's the thing.
Why does that matter?
But exactly, I'm kind of saying the opposite.
You can trace it back into scientific evolution.
But that wouldn't give us any kind of purpose.
But that's the thing. If I'm experiencing something and I'm okay with it and I want this to be my purpose, what is philosophy to say no? That's not your purpose.
No.
You can't
That's
do
the
that.
thing. I'm not saying I wouldn't say that shouldn't be your purpose.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that you also can't say that it should be your purpose. You can say neither. You have to remain neutral on the subject for the very same reason that I can't say that shouldn't be your purpose. You can't say that it should.
No. So this is getting to the is-ought distinction with Hume, right?
Yeah, I think a person can say I should.
I think Hume's wrong, and you can get an ought from an is. We do it all the time.
We do it all the time, but we shouldn't.
But we can, and we should. I think you know, in the scientific case of objective, I think I can make a very good case for it. I do think we will derail. We
will definitely end up talking for another 1.5 hours. But I don't think that's necessary. I don't think that's necessary to do.
It is with your criticism to her perception of her own purpose.
I don't necessarily think so, because all I am saying, this is the crux of it, is that I suppose this is where the difference between us lies, is that if we can all admit that in an absolute objective sense we should be epistemological nihilists, except for the fact of knowing that we exist,
Right.
every other piece of knowledge is...
Including the laws of logic, all of them?
I'll grant you that if you like. Okay, let's say that that's the case.
Sure.
Based on that, I don't see how you cannot logically conclude
I
that-
have issues with the words like "you should be," because it's like, okay, do you mean that like if you want to be like, you know, sticking to the truth, you should, or are we talking about should as in like it's what's best for you?
I don't see how you can possibly be an epistemological nihilist, but also make the claim that you can know moral truths, for instance. So that makes you have to be a moral nihilist.
No.
And also, Steve's not an epistemological
Well,
nihilist.
you are except for that one.
From that one
That
thing.
one case.
But
When I say that there is an objective case for morality, I'm saying that the same way I say that there is an objective case that the sun, that the Earth orbits the sun.
Okay.
It's that
Yeah.
first definition
Sure.
that I'm
But
referring
okay,
to.
so but
The
what
one- but
do you-
most importantly, the one we use in
Yeah.
every realm.
I
of
agree
science.
with you, but what the whole point that I'm trying to make, the whole nihilistic case, is that is wrong, that we shouldn't be doing that, because that's based on a flawed assumption. It's like, yes, you can say...
yeah, but
What
why
is that
does
for
it matter? We don't
Why
get
does it
any,
matter? Because
we don't get anything out of following that line of thought. If we say, okay, we accept this, but also assuming this, we go back to like, you know, the scientific definition of stuff, then we can get something out of it.
Yeah, but,
if we
why,
acknowledge
but that's the
it,
thing. If you're going to say that we should throw a philosophy out because we don't get anything from
no,
it,
I don't say we should throw it out. I'm just saying we
no,
should
no.
acknowledge it, but we don't necessarily need to
think-
concentrate on it.
Yeah.
it's not...
When we talk about free will, you're not
you
considering
don't
whether or not
we
you know
don't
for
get
sure, right?
you don't get to choose, you know, what you want to be true. As far as I'm concerned,
No, but you
as
can
far as I'm concerned,
you
if-
can
if-
choose what you focus
if
on.
nihilism is true, then it's true, and that's tough luck. And it's all very well and good saying, you know, well, we could just kind of ignore it or not talk about it, but that doesn't stop it from being true.
What about this angle? Let's say that nihilism is true. Let's just grant that epistemological nihilism is true.
Yes.
Then what? How are you going to live your life?
Well, that's exactly the problem.
Because-
But you can't say, because you can't live as a nihilist, you shouldn't be a nihilist.
Yeah, I'd agree.
It's like saying,
That's
you know,
fine.
it's
Yeah, no,
like
that's fine,
imagine, Rachel, I would say to you that because if you're an atheist, there's no afterlife, so there's nothing to look forward to. So, you know, don't focus on it. Don't talk about atheism. Don't call yourself an atheist.
That's okay.
But
I never spoke about it before I started YouTube,
But you'd
and I
still-
only talk about it on YouTube to entertain people.
but you'd still call yourself an atheist, right?
only if people ask me.
Okay, sure, but would you call yourself a nihilist if people asked you?
No.
No. And so what I'm trying to say is that if
Because
somebody
I
asked me if
still-
I was a nihilist, I would say yes.
Yeah, but I still don't really think I am.
Okay, but no, that's fine. That's
Okay.
fine. But what I'm saying is, if you're asking me if I'm convinced of
Yeah.
nihilism,
Okay.
then I have to call myself a nihilist.
Okay.
I mean, that's what a nihilist is. It's someone who believes that nihilism is sound. You know.
Yeah.
And so I can't just kind of.
Are you saying? I can understand what you're saying, where you would say you can't be an epistemological nihilist, which I am for the largest
Yeah,
extent,
okay,
not entirely, but then say there's some things that are true, such as morality, such as science,
and
etc.
what you can do is you can say, well,
So you're saying I have to be nihilistic about that and purpose?
at a philosophical level,
I don't
what I
think
would
so.
say is,
Yeah.
that you can say, well, let's just put epistemological nihilism aside and just work on the basis of what we think is true. If
Yeah,
you want to do that,
that's what
if
we're
you want to do
saying.
that, then you can do that. But then you have to recognise that your entire worldview and anything that you think is based on subjectivity, is based on your experience that can't be verified.
And that's the case for pretty much everything that
Yes.
you see with senses.
Yes, exactly, and that's the nihilistic case. It's like
That's
everything.
the existential nihilist case.
Yes.
Sorry, that's the epistemological case.
Yeah.
The existential is to do with purpose.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
I think you
intrinsic
can
in
talk
word
about the
purpose.
existential stuff within that realm of like, you know, what we perceive and what we know.
Yes.
When we speak about science, yeah,
yeah.
when we're speaking about the Earth revolving around
Yeah.
the sun, what are we caring about? What's intrinsic in that?
Yeah.
It's that you and I experience it to be the same.
Okay, but so let me sum up this nihilism then. It would be the case to say that, in accordance with my experience, the Earth orbits the Sun as an objective fact, as a scientifically observable and verifiable fact.
The only thing that makes that objective is the science, though, of course. Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
However, the problem is, and this is the whole reason why nihilism is a big problematic philosophy, is because I can't say that therefore the Earth definitely, objectively, absolutely orbits the Sun.
That's fine. Yeah, neither can I.
But if you think, but that okay, so this is the thing. You're content to just kind of say, that's fine. Let's just get on with things.
We have to.
But do you understand?
Yeah.
Do you understand how some people can't do that? It's like, yes, sure, it may be the case.
I do understand.
It may be the case that you have to in order to live a fulfilling life. But what if you just can't get around that? That is a big philosophical investment.
Look, Nietzsche described nihilism in the worst kind of ways, right? He called it a disease. And he said it's because it does this to the mind, it does it to really capable, intelligent minds, and it can keep them there forever if they don't get out of it. And I can understand it, and it seems, maybe I'm wrong, that you're in that rut.
But do you see
Yeah.
the problem in saying that? Because I get asked the question, well, what does it matter if I'm in that rut? What does it matter if I don't get out of that? And you could say, well, you won't get anywhere, but so what?
Did you say that you exist? Did you agree with me that you exist?
Yeah.
And that's just your best assumption?
Sure.
And would you say that you experience happiness and sadness?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And you like happiness?
Yes.
And you don't like sadness?
That's right.
Yeah. And you could say that you have a pursuit towards happiness?
Absolutely, yes.
So you could call that a purpose?
If that's what you want to call purpose, then fine. I have a purpose. But to me, that purpose is hollow.
But first of all, whether that's hollow or not, that means that you are not an existential.
Well, no, because that's not how I would define purpose.
I understand. Like, why does purpose need to be anything else? Does it matter if it manifests in this realm, or in the realm in your head, or a realm somewhere else? If you define purpose as something that you value and what you want to do, or however it might be, does it have to have that epistemological essence that you can't find in this realm?
I would say, in order for me to be satisfied, yes.
Right.
But perhaps that's the difference between you guys and me. Is the fact that you seem to be willing to put this to the side.
I just don't think there's a need to preface every single argument with, oh well, we can't know everything for sure, but within this, like, you could say, oh well, we can't know everything for sure, but the cure for cancer is, like, oh well, we can't know everything for sure, but this band is playing at this, like, bar. I don't think there's a need to preface it for everything. I think it's okay to say that, yeah, this is a thing, this might possibly be true, but let's just put it aside for a minute and talk about what we do know, and talk about what we know scientifically, objectively within that, even if it's not, what was the term we were using? Like
the epistemological.
Yeah, the absolute objective.
Maybe just for one last approach from me. When you view something with your vision,
yes,
be it that cup that we're talking about, the cup, I should say, the me, Rachel. When you view these things, you understand what you're seeing is not actually the case. It's the representation that your mind's making. Yeah. So when you observe anything, you have to fall back on this knowledge that it's not actually the way you're looking at it. Does that stop you from having problems looking at things?
So I can answer you both at the same time now, because I remembered what you'd said that Rachel that made me kind of jump up. You're both correct in saying that it is not a livable philosophy. Nihilism is not livable in the sense that you can't preface everything you do by saying, well, we can't really know everything. But the whole point that I'm trying to get across to you is that is why it's so important that we don't just say, let's put nihilism to the side. Because if you say that, then the person who is convinced of nihilism, so at the moment I would say that the arguments that I've put forward, I'm fairly convinced of. And so if you're willing to just kind of put those to the side, that's fine. But let's say I can't do that. And you recognise that it's an unlivable philosophy because you can't preface everything you do. But to the nihilist, the problem there is that, well, that makes life unlivable, because if it is true that you can't really know everything, but it's also not practical to to preface everything you do or know or think with the assumption that you can't know anything, then that makes no thought, no action, no anything practical. And that's the essence of nihilism. That's the whole problem with it. And so it's all very well and good saying put it to the side, but the whole problem is that you just can't do that. But you also can't live as though it's true, and so you're just stuck in a paradox of existence.
Yeah.
I live as if it's true. I know that's the case. It's just, it depends on the conversations we're having.
Yeah.
That's where the topics are relevant. So if we're talking about what's true in the scientifically objective sense, it does not, that doesn't come into it. But if we're speaking philosophically about anything, it does come into it. And I don't push it aside. It's always acknowledged. I know it's there. It's fine.
Yeah, I don't want to mischaracterize.
No, I'm saying it's there. I acknowledge it. I know it's a fact, and I have to bear with it. But as we were saying earlier on, and I think you agreed with me, it starts with you being conscious, and inside that consciousness is values and preferences that may not adhere to the world that we're experiencing in the way that we think it does. But the point is that because of that existence, because you can experience pain and pleasure, all of that comes before you can view anything with your senses, and when you view things with your senses, that is where you get into this epistemological.
I want to be careful here. I think I agree with you that you can only know that you exist, but saying things like that consciousness that you know exists, you can also know experiences things like pleasure and pain. I don't think that comes as a package.
What pleasure and pain?
Because they could be illusions.
They could be illusions.
They could be illusions. So I don't think you can say that. So if you're going to base that, if you're going to base your objective case for meaning on that, then you've got a problem, because those things.
Because that goes through the senses, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So you've still got a problem, and this is effectively the point that I'm trying to make. It's like, well, it seems to me that you just can't get past it. That you just have to accept that everything you know and everything you do and everything you think is based in something that can't be verified. It's based in something that cannot be shown to have meaning.
It can't be verified in the absolute sense. It can be verified in the scientific sense.
But on this view, it also means that the scientific method can't be verified, so who cares?
It means that the scientific method, it means that logic, it means that math, all of that could be false.
Yes.
Yeah. So the laws of logic fall into it as well.
Well, I mean, that's a matter of contention, but even if they do, then yes, but can't you see the problem here?
When it comes to, let's talking about, like, the purpose of life, the meaning of life, how we live our lives, I don't really see why it matters that much, because if a person feels like they have purpose in their life, then they have purpose in their life, whether it exists, like, objectively or not.
Is that not like saying, well, what does it matter if God exists or not? I mean, if someone feels like God exists, can't we just say that he does?
Because one of them pertains towards an objective claim about the world, about the universe that we inhabit, and one of them is just a personal experience that they're having. When I say to you, I have purpose, I don't give a crap if it goes through that filter or not. What I care about is that I'm happy, I'm content, that I'm making my way to make progress. It does not... The reason I don't bring...
When people make claims about God, it's a separate thing from anything within them, if that makes sense. Like, they're making a claim about something else.
Do you see the point I'm making, in the sense that to ask why does it matter if something is the case or not, if you can just... So you said, why does it matter if there is no purpose if people feel like they have purpose? Or if there is no objective purpose? Or if there is no absolute purpose if people feel like they have purpose?
Yeah, I don't see why it matters if there's no absolute purpose.
So what she's saying is
because within what we experience, Yeah.
So my purpose, I don't care if it's absolute. Some people do, and they want that absolute purpose. That's when nihilism really gets in the way. That tough.
I wouldn't necessarily say that I want it. I would just say that
it would be philosophically satisfying.
In the same sense that you just say, well, ultimately, it based on the philosophy that I've constructed here, it doesn't matter if there's no objective purpose.
But it's not even a philosophy, it's just how you experience something. So when it comes just to purpose, there is nothing to say that it has anything to do with morality, anything to do with epistemology.
Sure, but...
And when it comes to you saying things like, oh, well, if you think this, you should be a nihilist. I don't think anyone necessarily, should be forced into nihilism, because if people... if people want to have a purpose in their life and people want to, do you know what I'm trying to say?
I think I see what you're trying to say. It's like that. Well, but I want to be careful about how we're using the word "should." There, I'm not.
I understand.
I'm not saying. I'm not saying they should, as in we should make them be nihilists. What I'm saying is that
you're
if
saying
they want to be consistent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think honestly, people are irrational beings, and people aren't consistent, and people do things that they might not morally agree with, and people do things that might not necessarily be right or correct or honest all the time. And I think. Yeah. It's okay.
But do you see there that seems to me like you're saying, which is fine.
I think as long as people acknowledge it, it's okay.
It's fine to say something like it's like nihilism may be the case, but people should be allowed to kind of live with cognitive dissonance and sort of convince themselves that it's not the case.
But
I know you disagree with that, but is that effectively what you're saying, Rachel?
I didn't get that impression.
It's like even if nihilism is true, that doesn't mean people should be nihilists, because they should be able to kind of just feel like there's purpose anyway, even if there isn't.
So, I guess it all comes back to like how you define nihilism, because for me, to be a nihilist means you have a feeling that life doesn't have purpose. And so if you feel like your life has purpose, you can't be a nihilist.
Okay, no, I'll grant you that. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And that has nothing to do with whether or not their thoughts are true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the purpose is philosophically
I see exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
So this is why someone can be not a moral nihilist, not an existential nihilist, but also an epistemological nihilist like myself, if you will, because they're not intrinsically related. They just seem as such because of the worldviews that we're given by Christianity, by these other things. They necessarily conflate them, so that when that rug is pulled away from their feet, from my feet, your feet, whoever it is, you're left thinking, where do I get that package? And nihilism seems like a threat that destroys the entire package. It doesn't. There's many factors that get involved, some of them stronger than others, depending on what your preference is, what you think your purpose is. They're just not related in the sense that I think you think they are.
So I think this is a good place to round off.
I think so.
Yeah.
Let's say then, in conclusion, I want to perhaps clarify my view on this based on what's been said. I think you make a fair case there that if nihilism is the belief that there is no purpose to life, you can't be a nihilist if you feel like there's purpose, even if that purpose is subjective, even if that purpose is delusory. The fact that you feel it. The only contention that I would have with living that view is the fact that if I knew that the purpose that I believed in were only subjective or were delusory.
How about a third factor? How about your purpose is well substantiated by scientific objectivism? Yeah,
sure. But what I'm saying is that because of the epistemological nihilism that I hold, to the extent that you hold it too, I would recognise that on a philosophical level, that itself is unverifiable. So ultimately, it comes down to something that is.
So, sorry to interrupt, but if someone says to you, "What's your position on nihilism?" I guess you would say, "I'm a moral nihilist."
I'd absolutely say I'm a moral nihilist.
If I said to you, "What's your position on science and knowledge in general?" you would say that I assume, to be consistent, that you are an existential nihilist.
Well, yes, I'd have to be, yes.
But when someone says to you, "Is it true that vaccines cause autism?" do you go back to that foundation, or do you not? Do you appeal to the other definition of objective that we've used?
Because
I've seen you talk.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
But you do with morals.
Yeah.
And that's my problem.
But that's the nihilist conundrum. It's like if I didn't do that, then I wouldn't be able to live.
Why is that also? Why could that not also be true of morality?
How do you mean? But I'm not necessarily. I'm not justifying my not doing so by saying that if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to live.
No, but what you are doing is
I'm saying that's a big problem.
What gives you a fact to do with well-being or morality. I know we don't want to really go there, but when someone gives you something off that essence that complies with scientific objectivism, your response is to say we don't know for sure because of existential nihilism. But if somebody says to you, "Here's some physical facts about the Earth orbiting the Sun," your response isn't, "Hey, let's go back.
But
to this
that's because I know what they mean.
I personally want that consistency.
That's because I know what they mean. If they sat me down and they asked me and they didn't.
But do you know what they mean? Because Rachel's just told you about what her purpose is, and you seem to be changed. Like, oh, I see. That's not what I would have been wrong, as I have been wrong, to project on you that you had purpose in the same sense that I did.
I'll grant you that. But what I would say is the reason why I wouldn't bring this up if somebody asked me a fact about the universe, say, is because it's clear that the objective of that conversation is to reach agreement based on scientific objectivity. Now, I could recognise it in my head, without necessarily even saying so, I could recognise that even the fact that we're having such a conversation ultimately is meaningless.
Right.
But I can still have that conversation, because just as I can't justify any reason that I should have that conversation.
Do you mean ultimately could be meaningless? Because to say it is meaningless is to know that this world is pointless, whereas you don't know that.
Okay, fine. Well, that's fine. Because I want to round things off here. I don't want to dive into that. But I'll say that for what I'm trying to say here, that distinction doesn't matter.
Okay.
Because what I'm saying is it's not necessarily the case that if somebody asks me, do I know the Earth orbits the Sun, and I say yes, that if you were to sit me down and ask me in a philosophical sense, do you know that the Earth orbits the Sun? Do you know that? Then I would say no. And I think that's the kind of consistency that we're looking for. In a practical sense, like you say, it is impossible to live like that and talk like that. And so yes, I do answer questions in the way that you would think me to answer them, but I
think the nature of the question itself is defined by the context that we find ourselves.
But what I'm saying is, when I answer a question in that context, when I do answer the question, yes, the Earth does orbit the Sun, for me, that means I'm living a contradictory life and I'm not philosophically fulfilled, because I realise that what I'm saying, what I'm talking about.
So the mere fact of admitting that you could be wrong means it's contradictory.
No, it's not. It's not admitting that I could be wrong. It's like I'm answering that question untruthfully. I'm saying,
okay.
I'm saying yes, I know that the Earth orbits the Sun.
But I would say that what you're doing is you're assuming, as you actually just said, that they're meaning the scientific objective definition.
Yeah.
So according to that, they're not being contradictory at all.
But the problem is that I can't verify the truth of.
Is that not a separate question entirely?
I think it is.
No, because if you're going to say, well, it might not be absolutely objective, but it's scientifically objective.
You could view it like a game.
I'm saying you can't say something's scientifically objective, because how can you prove that scientific objectivity is true if you can't prove that anything is true?
Well, that's like saying, how can you have rules in a game if the game isn't real? You can still have rules within the game.
It is. The game is probably a good analogy here. If we're inside a game and there's certain physics that have been programmed into the game, the scientific objective truth that we're talking about, the objectiveness in that science realm, is to do with the game. So if you say to me, can I make my car go faster? There is answers to that in the objective sense when we're talking about the game. If your response is, well, actually, we don't know whether or not we can make your car go faster with a booster or whatever it might be, because we don't actually know what the rules are outside, etc. Yeah. You're not answering my question, because my question pertains necessarily.
Okay, so let me use your analogy, but can I switch it to chess? Let's say we're in a game. Let's say we're pieces in a game of chess. We're in a game of chess, and all that we know are the rules of chess. We don't know the rules outside of that. In the same sense that all that we know in this world is scientific objective truths, and we don't know anything more than that. So, in the game of chess, someone, the castle may ask, can I move diagonally? And we would say, no.
Yeah.
But
that would be one of their laws of logic.
If you had been reflective enough, if you'd been a philosopher and you'd realised that perhaps there are some laws that exist externally to this game of chess, the only correct answer to, can I move diagonally, is, I don't know.
No, because it depends. No, it depends on the game.
I kind of agree that is sort of true. However, I don't think that it's relevant to the knight in that game, because
no, it's not.
That's the best part.
Yeah.
Is it relevant to the game?
No.
So when most people are talking about science, they're talking about the game of life, the game that we experience, the game that we objectively have, right?
Yeah.
They're not talking about outside of the game.
And I think the same thing comes in when we talk about like the meaning of life and the purpose of life.
They're not. Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily
That's a fantastic point, yeah.
matter
But I
to the
do-
average person in the grand
I do
scheme
like
of
your
things.
analogy.
No, I'll grant you that.
And I
That's a
do-
fantastic
I do
point.
see what you're saying.
But
So they could
but
say,
yeah, so-
hang on, outside of this
Yeah.
realm,
Mm-hmm.
the rook, the castle, can go diagonally,
Yeah.
maybe, because maybe that's not one of the laws of logic
Yeah.
that's actually outside of it. We don't know because we're stuck in the game.
Okay.
But notice the laws of logic themselves, in that sense, they can't infer them.
Okay.
That's what I was saying.
Let me actually round this off now.
Yeah. Let's
Yeah. Okay.
So
Thank you everyone for
so
sticking by.
the
God, if they've made it this far.
so the person who if you are the castle in the game of chess.
Yeah.
Okay. You ask the question, should I move forward 2 pieces? If you move forward 2 pieces, you put the opposite team in checkmate.
Okay.
According to the rules of the game, yes. Your purpose is to move forward 2 pieces. And so if you are the type of person who, when you're looking for purpose, doesn't care for the baggage of epistemology, then you could call yourself not a nihilist, so to speak.
Not a moral nihilist.
You could say that you're not a nihilist.
Same
if
true
you
of
like.
purpose. Yeah.
However, when I'm asking, should I move forward 2 pieces, I don't mean to say, should I move forward if I want to win the game. I just mean, should I move forward? And outside of that game of chess, that's almost a meaningless question. Only if you abide by the rules of the game can you say that you should or you shouldn't. But when the philosopher when the philosopher is thinking in terms of all realms of knowledge, not just the knowledge that can be verified, then the question, should I move forward 2 spaces, is unanswerable, and that is what makes the nihilist a nihilist.
That makes the existential
However-
nihilist a nihilist.
I can
However, the
understand
problem
that.
is that we are all playing the game of chess, and we can't not be playing the game of chess.
Yeah.
And so it's possible in a practical sense to say, you should move forward 2 spaces. And if someone asks, should we move forward 2 spaces? What is my purpose? Your purpose is to move forward 2 spaces.
There's a serious teleology when it comes to chess.
But you have to just, if that's going to satisfy you, then you have to be satisfied with the fact that the game just is, and that winning the game is your objective no matter what.
So the game, as it were, is that I'm conscious in some form. That's that's the given I use, and then all I know is the rules afterwards.
The game
But
is
all
the
I was going to
scientific
say-
objective realm.
It's essentially because that's what you observe for your
Yeah.
senses,
Yeah.
right? Because you start as the piece, maybe that's the consciousness, and then I think you're probably right. Then you view the rules according to your own senses as a rook,
Yeah.
as a pawn, or whatever it might be, or a queen in your case, Rachel.
Aww.
So I will say it's the last point I might make is that notice the way in which the question was phrased. And I understand that this is off the cuff. You said, should I move forward 2 spaces and put the king in check? That question, is that pertaining to the game, or is that pertaining to something else?
Exactly.
Because the question is using terms that we know about the game, is using laws of logic that we know about the game, if you will. It is a question about the game.
Yeah, but do you recognise? So
Of course.
this is why I wanted to end with this, because it's basically saying that yes, if you're talking about the game, then that's a meaningful question with a meaningful answer.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to escape the game, logically speaking,
Yeah.
then it's not a meaningful question and it has no meaningful answer, and you can be a nihilist.
Yeah, if you want absolute morality,
Exactly.
if you want absolute purpose, or if you want absolute knowledge, I'm sorry, but your senses put you at a state where that is not ascertainable to you.
It's not possible.
It's not possible.
Exactly. And when I say
I agree with
when
you
I
on-
say that I'm a
on-
nihilist,
Yeah.
that is what I mean.
And I would say that under that definition, I'm pretty much with you. In fact, I'd say I'm with you. It's just I have no reason to say why we would put morality in that place, but not also physics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think the next piece to play is to move over to Stephen and Rachel's channels and to watch the other conversations, slightly shorter than this one, that we've had over there. I want to thank you all for sticking with us. I'm talking to the audience now, by the way, because you can't see us at this point. I certainly want to thank you all for sticking with us. I'm sorry this has taken so long. I hope that you've gotten something out of this conversation. Do let us know what you think of the things that we've been saying. If it's something you want us to carry on talking about, perhaps we should do it again and give ourselves more time.
I would say that. I would echo your sentiment there, that if this is something that concerns you all a lot, if there's things that you think that I haven't addressed adequately, or Alex, let us know, because we are interested in this topic. I know I can definitely say that.
I think it was kind of like a difficult one for me to talk about, because I'm not a philosopher like you two. I've never studied philosophy like in any kind of academic setting. So
perspective makes makes your perspective very valuable, because you represent a lot of people that find themselves in this.
The label of philosopher is not something someone bestows upon themselves. It's almost a fatuous label. It's like anybody is a philosopher. I think that no matter who you are, this is something that you'll probably come into contact with intellectually, and I hope that this discussion has helped elucidate some people's views. If it hasn't, then we can elucidate further. If it has, then I'm glad. Let us know in the comments.
And if you want me to ask more stupid questions, I will do.
Well, we're going to certainly be asking more questions in the other videos that we're putting out. So do hop over to Stephen's channel, do hop over to Rachel's channels. The links are, of course, in the description. We're going to be talking about veganism on Stephen's channel. We're going to be talking about abortion on Rachel's channel, and the links are down below. So do go and check those out. Let us know what you thought. Don't forget to subscribe. Do be sure to follow us all on social media. And thanks again for sticking to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.